All right. Well, let's go ahead and get started here. Welcome to the June 2022 Wild Science webinar from the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission. And thanks to everybody for jumping on here and hearing about some of the great work our colleagues are doing across the state of Arkansas. We're going to be hearing from Vic DiCenzo today, the Black Bass Program Coordinator, as well as Ryan Farney, our Feral Hog Program Coordinator. Vic will be talking about the development of the new Black Bass Management Plan and kind of that process, kind of the human dimensions aspect of that, and how that's all coming together. Really interesting because that's a work in progress right now. And then Ryan will be talking about how the agency is assessing feral hog damage using drones. Would remind everybody that this meeting is being recorded and will be available to the public at a later date. If you would please mute your microphones until the presenters are finished, and then we'll take a few minutes after each presentation to answer any questions you might have. And you can either ask those here in the meeting or type them into the comment function. Okay, so let's get started. Vic will lead things off for us. Vic DiCenzo is, as I said, our Black Bass Program Coordinator. Been with the agency about a year and a half, joined the staff in January of 2021. He spent 24 years as a fisheries biologist prior to Game and Fish with both the Virginia Department of Wildlife Resources and Texas Parks and Wildlife, as well as 4 years in the private sector working on fisheries across the country. He, in 2016, received his PhD in human dimensions of fish and wildlife from Virginia Tech. His hobbies include DIY elk hunting in the Rockies, deer hunting, backpacking, and fishing. Vic's presentation is titled Partnering with Stakeholders to Create Arkansas's Black Bass Management Plan. Vic, take it away.
Okay, can everybody see that?
We got you, Vic.
All right. Yep.
Full screen and sounds good. Let's you're in good shape. Thanks.
Thank you, Trey, and good morning, everyone. As Trey said, this presentation is about the development of Arkansas's Reservoir Black Bass Management Plan. The presentation is going to start off with some background information on human dimensions and some public engagement processes that are sort of driving our here today. So everybody's probably seen this Venn diagram before, and I think it aptly describes what fish and wildlife management is. It's made up of organisms, habitat, and people, and it's sort of like a three-legged stool. And if one of the areas is a little bit underrepresented, then our management become a little bit wobbly. And oftentimes it's the people component where we lack the most information. And the concept of human dimensions or the importance of people is really not very new. Gifford Pinchot, who was the first chief of the U.S. Forest Service back in the early 1900s, said, to begin with, I had to know something about the people, the country, and the trees. And of the three, the first was the most important. And then not long after that, Aldo Leopold recognized the importance and the difficulty of human management in terms of wildlife management as well. So human dimensions can be a difficult concept or difficult discipline to define. And it's really comprised of two parts. It's first trying to understand and clarify stakeholders' perspectives. But then if you don't do anything with it, it's kind of worthless. So the second part is obviously to incorporate that insight into decision making. And we hear the term stakeholders quite a bit. In previous years, we may have used terms like constituents or users, but neither of those really apply anymore. There are plenty of individuals and groups that care about fish and wildlife management that may not hunt or fish. So we have to try to understand their values as well. So this definition here, it kind of does project a broad inclusion of people's values. And I think it's a good exercise in resource management to try to understand who our stakeholders are, not just who the users are. Everybody's probably familiar with the variety of ways, the variety of social science techniques that we use to get information on stakeholder values. The things on the left would be what we consider qualitative information. It's where you get rich, deep, meaningful information on stakeholders, but it doesn't really provide us with percentages of individuals or groups that like this or that. So things like focus groups or nominal groups. On the right side are the quantitative techniques, and mail surveys has always been considered the bread and butter of social science. But there's a lot of different ways to try to come up with percentages or descriptions of what percentage of people feel a certain way about a certain topic. So why do we care about involving stakeholders? And the literature really provides three distinct reasons to involve stakeholders. The first, it just makes sense to involve stakeholders in decisions that affect them. But there's also a substantive tenet as well, and that is that they may have unique contributions that could help inform decisions. Oftentimes, they are users of the resource more frequently in a given year and maybe over a longer period of time. So they might have some sort of temporal information that can help us with our decision making. And third, it's just pragmatic. It just stakeholders are more likely to support decisions that and facilitate implementation. And I think it's that third one that we've really utilized with our black bass management plan. So there are a variety of keys to successful public involvement. First, agencies must create an environment for total transparency, and that builds trust and communication. Next, involvement should happen throughout the process. It's usually insufficient to simply engage stakeholders at the end of what we're working on. Next, all stakeholders should be represented, and we want to incorporate public values so that they have some influence on the process. Again, that goes back to the definition of human dimensions, where we have to clarify that information, but then we actually have to utilize it as well. And agencies must create ways for two-way communication. These dialogues are critical to success, and later in the presentation, I'll share our approach to stakeholder engagement as we're developing this black bass management plan. So I saw this sentence from a paper, a human dimensions paper by a wildlife professor some time ago. And I think it really encapsulates this sort of balance between the biological information and the social science information. And that it, the biology, the data that we have on organisms and habitat, it sets the bounds on what we can do, but it doesn't necessarily tell us what's in the best interest of the many stakeholders that we represent. So we call this sort of the stakeholder approach to what we've taken with the black bass management plan. So the role of the fisheries manager in the stakeholder approach is to first identify the full range of stakeholders. And I think the key is that we're not yielding professional responsibility to stakeholders, nor are we imparting our values on the process. We're just working to identify the range of interests that exist, and then combined with that biological information, create strategies that meet long-term stakeholder goals. So the result is a partnership of professionals and this diverse group of stakeholders that are working together to identify the management goals and the strategies to meet them. And what's inherent in this approach is this notion of value choices and technical decisions. And I would bet that across the country in fish and wildlife agencies that professionals are setting a lot of the resource goals. And what we're advocating for here is a little bit different. Under this stakeholder approach, we're trying to create an environment where the stakeholders have provided their values. So what is important to them, what they seek, what drives their satisfaction, and then armed with these stakeholder goals, we're making the technical decisions to allow those black bass management goals to be reached. Now, there's a lot of things that go into making the human dimensions part of it and this public engagement part important. But two key concepts that I think really have driven our process is organizational trust and social learning. And in the past 20 years, there's been a number of studies on trust with natural resource agencies, and there's been a lot of theory developed to do that. And organizational trust is simply the willingness on the part of the stakeholders to accept the actions of the agency, and we are here to represent their interests. And there's two key factors related to organizational trust. The first is the technical competency of agency staff, and then the second is procedural fairness. Now, a lot of studies have noted that the technical competency becomes less of an issue. Stakeholders generally believe that we are competent and trained well enough to make these decisions, but procedural fairness becomes the overriding factor in organizational trust. And it occurs when the process of making decisions is easily understood, it's considered fair, and stakeholders believe they have a voice. So the three ways that we are trying to achieve this procedural fairness in the development of this Black Bass Management Plan is high quality contact that is personable, frequent, and has timely communication. We've created a platform for consistent and constructive dialogue. And finally, early engagement and creation of collaborative processes that foster new ways of thinking. The new way of thinking is stemming from the fact that we're trying to learn on the front end what the stakeholders value and then incorporate that into the process. The other construct is social learning, and it's important in developing strong relationships between agencies and stakeholders. And it's defined as enhancing common knowledge, skills, and thinking and acting together. It's committing to a process of mutual learning in which participants agree that they individually do not have all the answers. And that's kind of hard. Everybody has their own values. Everybody has a little bit of an ego. We have a lot of armchair biologists out there that think that they have the answers to the management. And it's the collaboration of this social learning that really is powerful. So it's essential because, natural resource management can be complex. So with social learning, people recognize that others' interests are as legitimate as their own, and that by doing so, we can identify common purposes. So ways that we've tried to foster social learning in the development of this plan is open communication, and the ability to trust others and suspend what you think you know. We want knowledge and judgments coming from various perspectives. So again, it's that broad representation. We've sought creative and unrestrained thinking to generate new concepts and ideas. And although consensus is nearly impossible, finding common ground is not. So trying to find that common ground has been important. And then agencies have to follow very formal processes for public engagement. The democratic structure simply refers to seeking new and innovative ways at communication. Finally, multiple sources of knowledge simply refers to what happens when technical experts and stakeholders get together. And what we're seeing is it's yielding an understanding greater than either could have produced by themselves. So that's sort of the academic and human dimensions background of this, our approach to this planning process. So we're working on the fourth version of the Reservoir Black Bass Management Plan. The first version came out in 1992 and was really sought to identify harvest regulations that would be best suited for the reservoir black bass fisheries. The second one was in 2002, and it sought to use a lot of the previous data to start making some comparisons among reservoirs. In 2017, the third version came out, and it took a more holistic approach, and it used that framework of fish, habitat, and people to sort of drive the direction from 2017 till now. So we're in the process of writing the fourth plan and really trying to ramp up the public engagement process, the human dimensions component of this. So there were 5 ways I wanted to increase and improve our stakeholder engagement process while developing this next plan. And historically, state fish and wildlife agencies seek public comment at the end of a process. And often that's seen as a token gesture because decisions have already been made. We wanted to begin our planning process with public engagement and maintain that until we have an approved plan. And we wanted broad representation, and I'll talk about that in just a moment. For example, a process that relied simply on tournament anglers would really not produce a successful plan or a plan with broad buy-in. And similarly, if we excluded tournament anglers from the Black Bass Management Plan, we would still be missing a key stakeholder. Surveys are great, but we also wanted to create a platform for two-way communication. Not only does each side learn from each other, but it's a great way to build a relationship and improve trust. And I think a critical part of our planning process is really to focus on areas where we can improve, allowing stakeholders to identify those areas. Finally, one of the goals of the plan is to come from stakeholders. So again, that's a little bit of a departure. It's applying the stakeholder approach to what we're doing. So this type of approach can be really time consuming. It can even become a massive research project, but we've really worked hard to streamline this process. First, we had a mail survey that was conducted by Mississippi State human dimensions experts in 2018. That sort of described individuals' attitudes and opinions. Last fall, we ran a poll, so not a random scientific survey by any means, but we asked 3 simple questions. One was, why do you fish for black bass in Arkansas's lakes and reservoirs? So we're trying to get at motivation. What do you like about fishing for black bass? And what most important was, what don't you like about fishing for black bass in Arkansas's lakes and reservoirs? We had well over 500 comments that I was able to summarize and sort of categorize these comments. About the same time last fall, we began the process of forming a stakeholder advisory committee to broadly represent black bass anglers statewide. And that committee is charged with representing their broad constituencies across the state and help us with the development of this plan. So not only is finding the right people to serve one of the most important aspects of this approach, it's also probably the most challenging. And fisheries staff and administration work really hard to identify the right types of individuals to serve and finding people that were committed to serving. So we have 15 individuals from across the state. We're diverse racially. We have men and women. We have old and young. We have tournament anglers, including a national conservation director, a pro angler, a regional tournament angler, and some folks that occasionally fish local tournaments. But we also have industry, media, local government represented. So it's really is a diverse group that we feel confident that does represent all black bass anglers. So the first meeting, we've had 3 meetings. The first one was last December. And when we have these meetings, we're seeking a couple of things. One is we want there to be an educational component every time the stakeholder advisory committee gets together. So they should learn something about AGFC. They should learn something about the division or black bass management at every meeting. Second is the work that they're there to accomplish. So at the first meeting, we somewhat bombarded the committee with a crash course in black bass management. It was also a great time to start developing these relationships. We presented the results of the poll from last fall, and we used the dislikes question as sort of a springboard for them to identify issues with black bass fishing and management. So that was sort of the start of the committee starting to hone in on where we could improve. We then clustered all of these comments, and you kind of see that the post-it notes on that board back there, that's all the different comments that people came up with, and we tried to categorize those. So the second meeting was trying to figure out why these issues are important to Arkansans. And then the third meeting, we really set out for the stakeholder advisory committee to start working on identifying what the goals would be based on these issue areas. So the 7 areas that the advisory committee came up with, and again, they're using information from the angler survey, they're using information from the poll from last fall, plus their own values. They identified these 7 areas. And the first one, it really comes down to the point that there's no such thing as an average bass angler. So we've got individuals that are interested in trophies, and we've got individuals that are interested in harvest, and we've got everything in between. So how do we develop a program that diversifies these sorts of opportunities? This doesn't just mean the types of opportunities, but also the geographic location of these fisheries. Improving and restoring habitat was also very important, and anglers would like to see improved access and facilities where they fish for black bass. And anglers are seeking better communication, and this was a little surprising to all of us. I've been really impressed with the amount of content that the Fisheries Division and Communication Division puts out through social media, news releases, video, email, everything, but many stakeholders still are not seeing it. And this was somewhat eye-opening because where we thought we were doing a pretty good job, it just turns out that we still need to cast a wider net in how we message stakeholders. We need to do a better job of promoting bass fishing. There's a lot of pride from Arkansas bass anglers in our resources. And this promotion really does tie to the agency's R3 efforts, but it also means that we need to consider ways to promote the sport of bass fishing through tourism. There's also a concern with reservoir use conflicts. So whether that be between anglers and recreational boaters, or whether that be between tournament anglers and non-tournament anglers, we need to seek ways where we can minimize those conflicts. And then finally, bass anglers have opinions about other species. Some would like to see more opportunities for smallmouth bass. Some would like to see spotted bass populations a little bit more reduced. And then and this isn't unique to Arkansas, but there's this notion that Arkansas bass anglers think that striped bass and hybrid striped bass fisheries are too competitive with black bass fisheries. So it's not just competition for shad or forage fish, but it's competition for space and the behavioral changes that could occur where the species co-occur. So we have our work cut out for us. These 7 areas will really drive the direction of the plan, our work for the next 5 to 7 years. For each of these 7 areas, the stakeholders developed a goal, and then our staff, we got together and developed anywhere from 1 to 5 objectives for each of these 7 areas. And then within each objective, we've identified a number of strategies to meet that objective. So it's all going back. And this is, again, that value choices and technical decisions. So what I said earlier is that what we were seeking through this planning process for the development of this next plan are these 5 areas. And I think we've done a good job in sort of checking off all these boxes. So where we are right now is we have a draft plan that we are reviewing in-house. Once that plan is sort of assembled and all the different sections are put together and internally has been done, we have 4 outside reviews, one coming from Dr. Lockman at Arkansas Pine Bluff, and then 3 professionals from Texas, Florida, and Virginia to review our plan and make sure that it provides clarity and direction. And then the stakeholder advisory committee will get one last chance to sort of go over it and make sure that what we came up with in terms of objectives and strategies really do align with their goals. And then it'll go out for broad public comment before being adopted. So that's where we are right now. And that's all I have. And I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Vic. Anybody got any questions? I know I've got a couple, and I've sort of tangentially been involved in this process to an extent. So I'll lead things off. Vic, you talked about, focusing on weaknesses there in one of your last slides. Where do you think we as an agency or, fisheries division, communications division, whatever, where do we have the most work to do from what you to meet some of these stakeholder goals?
Well, Trey, it's certainly communication education. In fact, it got to the point where every time we were developing strategies for the 7 areas, communication education became part of each one of those, so much to the point where we thought that maybe we take communication education out as a distinct goal and just weave it into every single one. But we didn't want to minimize the importance of it. So we've kind of left it as its own. But within each of the areas, it's incumbent upon us to just do a better job of communication and education. And real quick, with that particular goal, we have two objectives that came out of there. And the objectives basically come down to education, and then the strategies that we use to meet those objectives are how we communicate them. So you've been a part of this process so far, and I'm sure you will continue to be as we rely on the communications division's expertise too.
All right, somebody else has got to have some questions about this process. Anybody? I don't see any comments in the comment box there. Vic, I'll follow up with one more timeline. What are we looking at? I mean, you said we're kind of at the process where we got an internal draft document, and I don't want to try to paint you into a corner or pin you down too much, but what are maybe your goals and fisheries goals for this moving forward as far as some deadlines and what have you?
I think that it is realistic for us to have an approved and signed plan by late summer or early fall. So to think about this becoming a 10-month process from start to finish, and with the level of public engagement that we've had, I think that's pretty quick.
Okay, great. Well, seeing or hearing no other questions, we'll move on. Vic, great presentation. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Trey.
All right, next up is Ryan Farney. Ryan is our feral hog program coordinator, and like Vic, relatively new to the agency. Joined the staff in September of 2020. Before coming to Game and Fish, he worked with the Oklahoma Department of Wildlife Conservation as a fisheries technician. Ryan received his bachelor's degree from Northeastern State University in integrated biology in 2017, and then received a master's from Northeastern State University in natural science in 2019. And interestingly, his master's work focused specifically on feral hog population management. So it looks like we've got the right guy in the job. Ryan's presentation today is titled Assessing Feral Hog Damage Using Drones. Ryan, I will turn it over to you at this point.
All right. Thank you, Trey. Can everybody hear me okay?
We hear you.
All right. Great. Can everybody see that?
We see it. It's still in presentation. There, bingo. You got it, man. Looking good.
Awesome.
Take it away, Ryan.
Yeah, I appreciate everybody tuning in today. So again, this presentation is going to be about assessing feral hog damage using drones. And this is a relatively novel concept, something that I'm just now starting to get into. This was actually brought to my attention by the University of Arkansas Cooperative Extension. They've been doing along with the Feral Hog Control Pilot Project. That takes place with Arkansas Department of Ag, USDA, and a bunch of other entities within the Arkansas Feral Hog Eradication Task Force. But this is something that we think is very valuable and something that we want to do going forward to help justify what we do across the state as far as feral hog control goes. So a little background to start off my presentation as well. The AGFC Feral Hog Program is tasked with controlling feral hog populations on AGFC WMAs that we own and lease. And so primarily that is our responsibility. That is what we're supposed to take care of first. And then we help on private land as needed as we can. We all of our biologists and technicians have full workloads, but if we can do some feral hog control on private land, we'll do that as well. So yeah, as our private lands biologists that primarily help on private land. And the overall goal of the AGFC Feral Hog Program, along with all the other entities on the Arkansas Feral Hog Eradication Task Force, is to eventually eradicate feral hogs from Arkansas. Now, I know that's a daunting task. Feral hogs have been entrenched in Arkansas for a long time, but that is pie in the sky goal for the task force. And as you can see on the right here on my slide, all of those agencies and organizations make up the task force. Now, not every single one of those agencies has individuals in the field dispatching feral hogs, but in some way they do contribute to the cause. And I'm extremely grateful for all their participation on the task force. So a little more background. With changes to specific regulations, I feel like we've been able to better manage our WMAs. So I'm sure most of us can remember those that were here. And if you weren't here, we made changes to the regulations on our WMAs as far as taking feral hogs in 2016. So with the combination change in regulation to restrict hunting and then adding some new equipment, we were able to go from just over 1,700 hogs removed across the state on our WMAs to over 4,000. So in 1 year, we increased our trapping effectiveness by 240%. So that's important because as the number of feral hogs on the landscape decreases, control becomes more expensive and time consuming. It's not intuitive to think of right off the bat, but once you start to really get to thinking about it, as you eliminate those individuals off the WMAs or on private land, it becomes harder to find those last few remaining sounders or boars or whatever it may be. And so you're going to spend more time and more money, and essentially you're going to be getting fewer individuals. So when somebody from the outside is looking at that, you're spending a lot of money to get a lot fewer individuals than you were when you first started. And that is the case, but it is important to get rid of those last few individuals. Otherwise, you're going to you'll move somewhere else where you have a target rich environment, and then those last few individuals that you left in that area will repopulate the area, and it won't take long to do that, and you'll be starting right back from square one. So that's why you have to spend that extra time and that money to get rid of those individuals. And because of this, we need a strong justification for control and the amount of money and the amount of time that we're spending to get rid of those last few individuals. And that's one of the main things that we're trying to do by using these drones and surveying this damage. So I'm sure most of us on this call know, but feral hogs are incredibly destructive. They're a species that cause millions of dollars to damage in Arkansas every single year. The very conservative estimate is about $19 million worth of damage each year. And I'm sure with the increase in seed prices and gas prices, apologize about that. But with the increase in seed prices and gas prices, I'm sure that estimate is going to go way up. And that doesn't even include the downstream cost of fixing the damage once it's happened. But along with economic damage, there's a ton of ecological damage. Prey on native animals, they destroy our native plant communities. And so they serve no ecological benefit in the northern United States or in the continental U.S. Not native to North America. They were brought here in the 1500s. So it is in our best interest as land conservationists to get these individuals off of the landscape. And I want you guys to keep this picture in mind right here. The contrast between the dirt that is overturned and then our native forbs and the grass and all that stuff, there's a great contrast there. And that's one of the reasons I included this photo. And stuff like this is what we're looking for when we fly the drones. We look for photosynthetic material as opposed to non-photosynthetic material or plants. So keep this in your mind's eye as we continue on. So traditionally, managers have assessed the amount of damage through visual inspection. So somebody's driving around on a WMA, or one of our private lands biologists gets a call, and we go out and we assess, you got a lot of damage out here. We need to do something about it. But it's nearly impossible to estimate the economic loss through simple visual inspection. Yeah, you can see that a guy lost, approximately 2 or 3 acres of corn last night to a sounder of hogs, but you don't know really how much exactly he lost. And it's almost impossible to tell him the economic value of that corn that he lost. So in addition to that, most of the time managers assess effectiveness of control methods through landowner surveys and inspection of damage. And both of those can be extremely biased based on how much time you spend in the field and the damage that you're actually able to see in your perception of the number of hogs on your property. That could depend on how much you spend on your property, how vigilant you are to keep watch for feral hogs. And so both of those methods of assessing whether a management strategy is successful or not can be very biased. Whereas with drones, we can get exact estimates, exact numbers for the amount of area lost and the amount of economic damage associated with that damage. So how can we answer those questions? How can we accurately determine the amount of damage in an area? How can we determine the economic loss associated with feral hog damage? And how can we tell if a method of control is effective at protecting a specific property? Well, I'm sure all of you guessed it, it's using drones. And as you can see on the picture on the right, that is all feral hog damage. Now, these images, the image on the right and the image at the bottom, are not the same image, but they're great examples of what we're talking about today. So I don't know if that's a soybean field or a cornfield, but you can see the loss there. You can see the difference between the plant's synthetic material and then the dirt. And whenever you bring a drone out to fly that areas, hopefully you're able to produce an image like you see there at the bottom. And so that image at the bottom is a map that was produced by the University of Arkansas Cooperative Extension team. They flew a 70-acre sod field in just a matter of minutes, 30 minutes. We were able to take those images back, process those, and we're able to render that map that you see there. And the damage from the sounder is represented in red. So this gentleman planted a sod field, a 70-acre sod field. He spent $40,000 to plant that field. That sounder came in that week, and eventually he lost 20% of his field. That's how much he had lost at the point that we were able to come in, map, and then bring a trap in. We brought a trap in the same day that we did the mapping. And that's one of the beauties about this whole process is we don't have to change anything about what we, as far as trapping and controlling the hogs. We can do it all in the same day. We just need to be able to map that area before we do any type of trapping. But we were able to determine that he lost 20% of his sod field, and it was about $10,000 worth of damage based on how much he spent on that field. So that's essentially the product that we're looking for. So how do we do this? How do you map damage? Well, there are multiple programs that allow you to do this. And one of them that we use, a program that we use to program our flights, is called Measure by Ground Control. And the images you see on the right side of the screen is a pre-programmed flight mission. So we can create these in the field, or we can create them in our office and then upload them to our drones and then fly them. But it's a pretty simple process. A lot of the times the programs, you just create the shapefile, it'll auto-fill all the flight parameters, and then you're good to go. It's really simple. It's straightforward. It doesn't take to do. And so the drone that you see at the bottom, that is actually a DJI Phantom 4 multispectral drone. It has 6 different lenses on it, and it allows you to see in different wavelengths of light. And so you can look in near infrared, red edge, NDVI, all kinds of very helpful analysis. So you send the drone up, everything is automated. You just press start once you get your program created. Once you get your flight plan created, you hit start, it flies the mission. You may need to change a battery or two depending on how big the area is, but it'll fly in the complete area. It'll come back, and then you just take your SD card and then you're ready to go into post-processing. So we use a program called Pix4D Fields. And so that program allows us to do a lot of different analysis. And this right here is an example that I created for this talk. This is actually a photo of my house. So I did a photo mosaic. I ran the analysis, and at the end of the analysis, a successful mapping mission should allow you to analyze multiple topics associated with feral hog control, such as cost benefit analysis, the extent of damage, and our control measures preventing subsequent damage. So the purple that you're seeing here in this photo, that is all photosynthetic material. And the stuff that has been blotted out, the stuff that doesn't have anything on it that's clear, that is non-photosynthetic objects or material. And so this allows us to see the areas that have been damaged. You can imagine this being in a glade or an ag field or whatever it may be, and this is what you would hope to see. And the great thing about this is you get a visual representation of the damage in the area, so you can actually look at it, and then you can also run a statistical analysis. And so if you see here on the bottom, the area acreage, that's 18.8 acres total in the purple that you see the square. And so the area visible is 13.7. That is all the photosynthetic material within that object. So we know exactly how much area was damaged within this. And so then we can run the math and we can figure out what the economic loss is. And this is the main reason that we want to know economic loss is it's a great justification for control for our constituents and also senators that may be wondering why we're spending so much money on feral hog control, but we're not removing a lot of individuals. It doesn't take but one bore or one sounder to create a lot of damage. That sod field that I showed you a couple slides back, that was one sounder. One sounder cost $10,000 in 1 week. And so it doesn't take many individuals to create a lot of damage. I mean, I'm pretty sure we're all aware of that. And so if we can go in and we can give them, well, this individual lost $10,000 in 1 week, but we came in and in 4 days we had this sounder trapped out. And then we can how much money we spend on our time and our corn and ammo. And then that creates a really strong cost benefit analysis. The second thing is we can show if there is subsequent damage occurring after we come in and we initially trap. So we come in, we map, we find that 13.7 acres are visible. So we trap the sounder, or we trap the individuals, everybody that we think is in that area. We come back in 6 weeks, whatever it may be, we map the area again, and we find that, now you've got 15.8 acres visible. And so we know that there's no more damage occurring, stuff's regrowing. But if we come back and we've got 10 acres visible, then we know that there's a problem. We've got more individuals in the area. And it may not be possible to see that initially just through walking the area. I mean, a drone gives you a perspective that we've never had before. So it's a great tool, and I'm I'm excited to see what we're able to do with this. And this has most effective in areas that are open. So we're talking about glades, agricultural fields, hay meadows, wetlands, stuff of that sort. We may be able to do forested areas during the winter. This was just taken a couple weeks ago at my place, and there's a lot of trees. Everything's leafed out, so you can't see to the bottom, to the floor. I'm interested to see if during the winter we would be able to pick up damage below the tree canopy when leaves are off. Now, you're not going to be able to do that during the summer. So this is ineffective for areas where we have damage in the mountains or wherever it may be. But for all those other habitats, we can use this at any time during the year and get a lot of meaningful data from it. So other agencies are already doing this. Like I said, University of Arkansas Cooperative Extension is the one that really kicked this off and got me interested in this. But we've assisted with those efforts, but now we want to kind of take the ball into our own court and get our own equipment. And I'm so thankful for Chris Medall and Meredith for helping me create a proposal and to send it off to create a grant to get it off to potentially get funded so we could buy this aircraft that you see right here, actually. So this is the DJI Matrice 300, and it's equipped with the H20N camera. And so with this setup, we would be able to fly a lot of areas. We are able to have a lot of flight time per batteries. And it not only would be able to allow us to map damage, but it also has a night vision camera and a thermal camera on it. So we could use it for density counts, and not just for feral hogs, but for several other programs within the wildlife division, whether it be deer or turkeys or even for upland game birds like quail. So we could use it for a lot of different things. We will be primarily focused on our WMAs. We want to make sure that we get those areas taken care of first, but we are certainly going to work on private land as it becomes available. As we find out that there is damage in those areas where our private lands biologists are working or whoever it may be. So like I said, I just wanted to give a couple examples of the other things that we could do with this. Mapping will not be the only use for this drone. We plan to purchase the camera. Like I said, it has night vision and thermal. And so these images just show you what deer would look like on the thermal camera from about 300 feet in the air. And so we can use this. We can, again, create a flight plan, a pre-programmed mission to grid out an area and to get a density count of deer within a DMAP club or a WMA. And so this would be really helpful for the deer program. If we're trying to figure out if we've got any hogs on a WMA or an area, again, it's going to be super helpful, not just for mapping damage, but for getting density counts and stuff like that as well. So I know that I kind of flew through that, but I would be happy to take any questions if anybody has any.
Thanks, Ryan. All right, let's open it up to questions. Who has some? I've got a bunch.
Let me stop. Let me stop presenting my screen real quick. Okay.
There we go. All right, I'm going to shoot some because I've got a bunch, and I apologize to those of you as somebody who flies a drone for other purposes for the agency. A lot of things come to mind. So here's one, Ryan. Like I'm really intrigued by this Matrice 300 and some of the capabilities there. Knowing that you're probably to like when we do spotlight counts for deer, for instance. I mean, we do those at night. You're going to have a lot of nocturnal activity. With current regulations regarding our inability to fly drones outside of daylight hours, how do you reconcile that?
Well, we actually have a permit through FAA to fly at night right now. So enforcement was the ones that initially got that. And when I was sent to flight school last year to get my license, I was lucky enough to have Brian Aston there, and he kind of gave me the rundown on all the certifications that we needed to have. And we've actually got a waiver now that allows us to fly at night. So you have to have that waiver with you and at all times when you're flying. But as long as you have that, you should be good to go. And so I keep that in my case whenever I fly at night. And that would just be if an FAA inspector came out and asked you why you were flying at night. Maybe you got reported by somebody or something like that. So, but as long as you have an up-to-date waiver, you should be good to go.
Good deal. I've I've often you talked about other uses for this. I have suggested to the waterfowl team. We run into a lot of perception that of overcrowding on our green tree reservoirs. I would love to see a hunter density survey flown with thermal imaging at some of our more popular areas to show where folks are setting up. I think we would find a bunch of people about 100 to 200 yards off of the main boating passages and ditches and bayous and stuff like that. That's my hypothesis, at least.
I think that you probably would too, and I'd want to fly that thing as high up as we legally could, so we wouldn't get shot at.
Before shooting hours, maybe.
There you go.
That might not preclude some outlaws from taking a pop at it, but
no, it'd be interesting to do for sure.
Ryan, you kind of outside of the drone, surveys and assessing damage and other uses. Where it's easy to get discouraged sometimes. I think the hog hunters and people that don't like what we're doing with our feral hog regulations are probably a vocal minority, but we see them a lot, especially on our social media channels and weighing in on that. Where are we, and do we have any, actual like a survey instrument we performed or anything that, where do you think we are in terms of public acceptance of our and statewide work to eradicate feral hogs in the state?
I think in a general sense, when you look at the majority of people across the state, they approve of what we're doing. I think that you have a few people on social media that are critical of what we do because we're taking away a hunting opportunity, something outside of deer season, something for them to go shoot on a WMA or something like that. But if you talk to a landowner, if you talk to that guy that lost that 10,000 acres or that $10,000 on his sod field, he wholeheartedly approves of what we're doing. It's those people that love to run their dogs or go use their thermal scope at night on a WMA that don't like what we're doing because we're taking away, a form of recreation for them. But the little bit of recreation that some individuals get from hog hunting is not near worth the ecological impact and the economic impact that they cause to our state every year. And so I think most people realize that. Most people accept and are happy with what we're doing, not just us, but USDA and Arkansas Department of Agriculture and everybody on the task force. I think generally people are pretty happy with what we're doing. I mean, just in the past 2 years, I think since January of 2020, the task force has been responsible for moving about 32,000 hogs off of the state. So a lot of people are happy with that work, but you're always going to have that small percentage of individuals that want to be critical of what we're doing, no matter what we do.
Thanks, Ryan. Okay, I've hogged the first portion of the question and answer period here. Does anybody else have anything? I'm looking, I don't see anything in the comment message box. Going once, going twice. Okay, hearing and seeing no more questions. Ryan, thank you so much. And Vic, thank you as well. A couple of great presentations. I enjoyed them thoroughly. Thank you all to everybody that has joined today to hear about this important work from our colleagues. And we will see you next month for the July version of the Wild Science webinar. See
Thanks,
everybody
Trey.
later.